It's hard to even write this, but I feel like sharing might help me process everything that's happened. A little background: I was married to my now ex-wife, Sarah, for 6 years. We met in college, and everything seemed perfect, or at least, I thought it was. She was beautiful, smart, and had this way of lighting up a room. For years, I honestly believed I'd found my soulmate. Things started to change about a year before the divorce. She became distant, always on her phone or finding excuses to stay late at work. I thought maybe she was stressed or going through something, but when I asked, she'd brush me off, saying I was overthinking things. Looking back, all the signs were there, but love blinds you, doesn't it? One day, I came home early from a business trip. I wanted to surprise her. Instead, I was the one who got the surprise of my life. My brother, Jake, was at my house. At first, I didn't think anything of it. He's my brother, after all. But something about the way they both looked at me when I walked in, the awkward silence that followed, it didn't sit right. That day stuck with me, but I pushed the doubts aside. I didn't want to believe that my wife and my brother, my own brother, could betray me like that. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe they were just caught off guard because I came home unannounced. But after that, I started noticing more things. Sarah began spending more time running errands, or going out with friends. Jake would come around more often than usual, too, always with some excuse about needing my advice or wanting to hang out. It felt off. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I ignored it. I didn't want to be that guy who suspected his wife of cheating. Then came the day everything unraveled. I remember it like it was yesterday. Sarah left her laptop open on the dining table, and a message popped up from Jake. I don't even know what made me look, but I did. And there it was, in black and white, proof of their affair. Messages filled with inside jokes, promises to figure things out soon, and worse, conversations about me. My heart sank. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I confronted her that night. I'll never forget the way she looked, shocked, but not because she was caught. She seemed more upset that I'd read the messages than about what she had done. She didn't even deny it. "I'm sorry," she said, but it was empty. Just words. Jake, he didn't even try to apologize. He told me it just happened, like cheating with your brother's wife is some kind of accident. After that night, everything spiraled. Sarah filed for divorce within a week. It was like she couldn't get away from me fast enough. As if I was the problem in all of this. Sarah didn't want to fight for much. She just wanted out. Didn't bother reaching out. My family was torn in half. My parents didn't know what to do. They were furious at Jake but also wanted to keep the peace. The divorce was brutal. At the time, I thought she was being generous, but now I see she just wanted to move on quickly so she could be with Jake without the baggage of our marriage. Within months of the divorce being finalized, she and Jake announced they were getting married. I remember sitting at my parents' house when my mom broke the news to me, her voice trembling with guilt. She said, "We thought you should hear it from us first." I laughed, an actual, bitter laugh, because what else could I do? My ex-wife and my brother were engaged. It was like some bad soap opera, but it was my life. The worst part, my parents went to the wedding. They said they didn't want to lose Jake completely and hoped it would bring some kind of resolution. I refused to go, of course. Just the thought of it made me sick. Jake and Sarah's wedding was the final nail in the coffin of what little family harmony we had left. I'd gone no contact with both of them by then, but I couldn't ignore the fallout. My parents tried to pretend things were fine, but it was obvious they were walking on eggshells around me. Every time they mentioned Jake or Sarah, even casually, it felt like a knife twisting deeper. A part of me hated them for going to that wedding, but another part just felt numb. It was easier not to think about it, so I threw myself into work and tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy. My therapist said it was healthy distraction, but honestly, it just felt like survival mode. Meanwhile, Jake and Sarah seemed to be living the dream, or at least that's what social media told me. Their posts were full of forced smiles and hashtags about true love and soulmates. It was disgusting, but also predictable. They were trying too hard to prove something, to themselves and to the world. I knew better than to believe the glossy facade. Then, about a year into their marriage, the cracks started to show. Little rumors trickled back to me, despite my best efforts to avoid anything involving them. Friends and even distant relatives would drop hints about how things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Apparently, Jake's wandering eye hadn't magically disappeared when he married Sarah. Shocking, right? At first, I shrugged it off. Karma, I thought. Let them deal with the mess they'd made. But a part of me couldn't help feeling a twisted sense of vindication. I wasn't rooting for their downfall, exactly, I just didn't feel bad for them. They'd burned my life to the ground to be together, and now it was their turn to watch the flames. Sarah tried reaching out once during this time. She sent me an email that started with some half-hearted apology. She stopped posting about their perfect life, and went silent on social media altogether. Could I say, "I told you so"? No, it was the start of their unraveling. Word got around that he'd been seeing someone else. At first, Sarah tried to keep it together, pretending everything was fine, but cracks were impossible to hide. I didn't care to dig into the details, but I heard enough through the grapevine. Jake had started an affair with a coworker, a younger woman, of course. He wasn't subtle about it, either. They were spotted at a bar together, acting far too close for two people who weren't supposed to be a couple. When Sarah found out, it was apparently a spectacular blow-up. A friend of a friend who still keeps in touch with her told me she caught him in the act, literally walked in on him with this woman. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had destroyed our marriage for Jake, only to end up in my shoes not long after. The fallout was messy. Jake didn't even try to deny it. He had the nerve to tell Sarah that their relationship had run its course and that she should have known what she was getting into. That part made me laugh out loud. It was such a Jake thing to say, selfish, arrogant, and completely lacking any accountability. Their marriage didn't last much longer after that. Sarah filed for divorce, just like she had with me, but this time it wasn't a quick and clean process. Jake wasn't interested in playing nice. He fought her on everything, the house, their savings, even the dog they'd adopted together. It got ugly fast, and for once, I felt like I was watching karma do its thing. But here's the thing, I didn't feel happy or vindicated like I thought I might. Watching their disaster unfold didn't bring me peace. If anything, it just reminded me of all the pain they'd caused me in the first place. It was like reopening an old wound, even though I wasn't directly involved anymore. My parents were caught in the crossfire, too. They tried to stay neutral, but Jake's behavior made it hard. For the first time, they seemed to truly understand what he was capable of, and it hit them hard. My mom even apologized to me, tears in her eyes, saying, "We should have seen it sooner." I told her it didn't matter anymore, but the truth is, it did. It always will. It's been a while since I've thought about Jake and Sarah, or so I thought. A few weeks ago, Sarah reached out to me, not through an email or a message this time, but an actual phone call. Seeing her name pop up on my screen was like being sucker punched. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was shaky, like she was holding back tears. She said she wanted to apologize, really apologize, for everything. At first, I was guarded. I'd heard enough empty apologies from her in the past, but this time felt different. She sounded broken. She told me she'd been through hell with Jake, and that she finally understood the pain she'd caused me. "I didn't realize what I had until I lost it," she said. "And I didn't realize what kind of person Jake really was until I lived with him." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her that she made her choice, but another part of me just felt sorry for her. She went on about how she'd been blind to Jake's selfishness and how she wished she could go back and undo everything. It was like she was trying to rewrite history, but it was too late for that. The call ended with her asking for forgiveness, not for us to get back together, but just for closure. I told her I didn't know if I could forgive her, and that even if I could, it wouldn't change anything. She seemed to accept that, though it didn't stop her from crying before we hung up. As for Jake, he's burned almost every bridge in our family. My parents have all but disowned him. My dad, who was always the peacekeeper, finally snapped after Jake's antics during the divorce. "I don't know who he is anymore," he said to me one night, and for once, I felt like he truly understood. It's strange how things come full circle. Sarah is alone, Jake is alienated, and my family is still picking up the pieces of what they destroyed. Meanwhile, I've been focusing on myself, therapy, hobbies, even dating a little. It's not easy, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm moving forward. Sarah's call left me with mixed emotions. I don't hate her anymore, but I don't think I'll ever fully forgive her. And Jake? He's just a stranger to me now. I never thought I'd feel closure from this mess, but life has a way of surprising you. A few days ago, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop. It wasn't planned, we just happened to be in the same place at the same time. I saw her before she saw me, and for a moment, I considered slipping out unnoticed. But something inside me said no. When she looked up and noticed me, her face went pale. She hesitated, then gave me a small, nervous wave. I walked over, and we exchanged awkward pleasantries. It was clear she wasn't doing great. She looked tired, worn out in a way that went beyond physical appearance. We ended up sitting together, more out of politeness than anything else. She told me about her life now, how she was trying to start over after the divorce, how hard it was to rebuild. She mentioned she was in therapy and working through the mistakes she'd made. At one point, she said, "I don't expect you to care, but I've realized how badly I hurt you. I can never undo it, but I'm trying to be a better person." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me admired her honesty, but another part of me wanted to tell her it didn't matter anymore. Instead, I just nodded and said, "I hope it works out for you." As I left the coffee shop, I felt lighter. Not because I forgave her completely, but because I realized I didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. I've moved on. Jake, on the other hand, is still stuck in his own self-destructive cycle. My parents told me he's been job hopping and burning bridges left and right. The woman he cheated on Sarah with has already left him, and he's living alone in a tiny apartment. I don't feel pity for him, but I also don't feel satisfaction. He's made his choices, and now he's living with the consequences. As for me, I'm in a better place than I've been in years. Writing all of this has been cathartic. A kind, genuine woman who knows about my past but doesn't judge me for it. It's early, but it feels good. For the first time, I can see a future that isn't defined by the betrayal and pain I endured. This will probably be my last update, but I'm ready to close this chapter for good. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about finding a way to live fully despite the scars.